Yeah, hi everybody. Really lovely to be here with you. Really warmly welcoming you and myself to this space. Today is the 23rd day of the month of Tammuz, or perhaps the 24th, depending on your time zone. Either way, we're now about 1 week into the period in our calendar called the Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks between the fast days of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. This phrase, Bein HaMetzarim, means in the narrow places. I just want to spend some time with the root of this word, tsar, which means narrow. It's a kind of point of departure for us today. I thought of the song, some of you may know it, Kol Ha'olam Kulo, the whole world, Geshet Tsar Me'od, is a very narrow bridge. And the main thing is not to be afraid. These come from the words of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. They're almost exactly his words, but in fact, in his great work, Likutei Moharan, he adds in an extra ma'od. So he actually says the world is a very, very narrow place. This is a real challenge. How do we acknowledge the call of this period to admit that there is tightness here? There is constriction. Some of this is really hard. And somehow to do that without fear, lo lefached, without becoming, to use this phrase from modern Hebrew, tsar ofek. Narrow-minded is the sense, but literally it's having a narrow horizon. And how do we keep our hopes and dreams and hearts and horizons as wide as the world, even in the presence of what tightens and challenges and provokes and breaks our hearts? How do we do this without becoming tsar ayin, another phrase from modern Hebrew, spiteful, petty, jealous, but literally narrow in the eye, only seeing what is gross or missing the subtlety of things, seeing in a way that is coarse, that is dualistic. Oh, if there's narrowness here, there can't be spaciousness. If there's sadness, there can't be joy. If there's difference, there can't be connection. Min ha-meitzar, we say in Hallel, in the service of praise, from the narrow place, Karati, I called to the divine, Anani v'merchav Yahu, who answered me with divine spaciousness. What might it mean to call out to the divine from the narrow place, from the place of our narrowness? What might it mean to receive the divine response of spaciousness? I want to say that just this is our practice. To notice, to welcome, to receive, to allow, even what is challenging, without being taken over, to really welcome in what comes fully, without contracting around it, to honor the truth of narrowness, the squeeze, the pain, and the truth of infinite spaciousness, and to see the sacredness of both. Because as much as this is a period in our calendar when we recognize the constriction, the bind, it's also when the walls come down. As Rabbi Alan Liu reminds us, the walls which encircle us, entrap us, limit. As we meet now, those walls that historically encircled the city of Jerusalem were breached on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the fast day that was last Thursday. So the opening is already here. The light is already coming in. I'm always delighted by the way that Hasidic sages are so happy to contradict themselves, right? To say one thing in one text and another thing in another, or one thing in one paragraph and another thing in the next. It really delights me because it's their wisdom, a deep wisdom, a universal wisdom, that things just aren't either or. To see them that way is to see narrowly. Maloch ala aretz kavodo, the whole earth is filled with the radiance of the divine. All the different textures of our experience, narrow and expansive, all of them are permeated by divinity. And if this combination we're called into, on the one hand, at this time, acknowledging our pain and fragility, and at the same time, rejoicing in the infinite wonder and majesty of it all. If this is unfamiliar, if it is unsettling, if it's cold, you might recall that Tsar, the word narrow, is also Mitzrayim, is Egypt. And we don't leave Egypt and go straight into Eretz Yisrael, straight into the promised land. There's those 40 years in the Midbar, in the desert. You know, sometimes first we have to step into the wilderness, into what is unknown and uncertain. We have to let go and stay there, stay steady, stay soft, without collapsing into constriction, without running back to Egypt. And then in time, we find ourselves at home. So let's practice together, friends. I invite you to find a posture. Even just the act of considering and even in small ways adjusting the posture kind of primes the soil of body and heart and mind. Some harmony of stability in the base and uprightness as best you can, and ease. Letting the body find its own harmony of these qualities, letting it lead the way. And once you feel relatively established in the posture, where might be a supportive, stabilizing, nourishing place to rest the attention. Perhaps the sensations in the soles of the feet, or the hands. Perhaps the sensations of breath wherever you feel them. Nose or throat or chest or belly. Perhaps the soundscape around you, the sounds and the silences in between them. Just choosing a place, one of these four or something else, to turn the gaze of the mind towards in the foreground of your awareness. While knowing that in the background there's room for everything. We don't have to clear it all up first. Perhaps tasting how simple this practice can be, just to turn the attention with a deliberate but subtle and soft inclination of the mind to some part of your experience, and then to just leave it all as it is. Very little we have to do. And whatever it is that you're choosing to turn attention toward, seeing if the way of looking can be interested in what's unfolding here, and at the same time undemanding, observing and allowing. And maybe there's some tightness somewhere. How might it be just to receive and welcome that into awareness? To let it be here to whatever extent it is, without taking over. In the very allowing it to be here, there's already woven in a kind of welcoming that is transformative in its own time. Sometimes we don't have to do any more than that. Just to see it is enough. And maybe we just let it be in the background and keep turning toward your chosen focus. Maybe you turn toward any tightness that shows up and observe and allow this. Both options really supportive. Welcoming and keeping the space wide open. And how about each time you breathe out, following the Talmud's teaching that sighing softens the body. And just letting your out breath, without having to exaggerate it, letting it be a sigh, and just inviting the whole field to soften. Doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. Maybe just a little release, a little melting, a little dissolving with the out breath. The whole body relaxes a little when we breathe out. And maybe you notice that we don't have to wait for all tightness to disappear to practice this softening, this welcoming. Even now, even in the midst of this, the next out breath can be a softening. Sometimes it's helpful for me to place a hand on my chest or belly or both. The physical touch is another invitation to breathe out and let go. And as well as soothing touch, you might also choose to drop a word or a phrase into the pool of your experience. Something that supports this welcoming and softening of everything that comes, that arises and fades. Maybe it's a word like softening, releasing. Maybe it's the phrase, it's okay to let go. You can just whisper this gently within. See what that does. Maybe it's Matir Asurim, the one who releases what is bound. And maybe in some small way, you notice that as you soften, as you let go, there's a kind of landing, a kind of coming home.
Thank you for that beautiful practice, Zac. Very moving. Max is going to put in the chat a link to a course that Zac is teaching. And please feel free to check it out. Thank you again so much to Rabbi Laura Geller for sponsoring today's sit in memory of Richard Siegel on the 5th yahrzeit, the 5th anniversary of his passing. And thank you, Max, for holding the technical pieces of today. Let's turn now to Kaddish Yatom, to Mourner's Kaddish. If you're in a period of mourning, if you're marking a yahrzeit, the anniversary of a death, if it's your practice to say Kaddish at this time, I invite you to stand. You're welcome to unmute, and we'll share in the words of Kaddish together, and I invite the community to respond, so those in mourning truly feel held. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemir Hasham,
Amen.
Alma, Yivra, Yivte, Ve'amlich, Yechon, Yechon, Kol Bet Yisrael, Bagala, Yizman, Imru Amen.
Amen. Meher Shmeir
Shalom b'mimad. Shalom aleinu. Israel Yaakov
Ya'akov Ha'olam.
Amen.
Aleinu v'Yaakov Yisrael. Shnei Tevel. Amen. May their memories be a blessing, and may all who are mourning be held in love and in comfort. You're welcome to be seated. If you're leaving at this point, thank you so much for being here. And I pray that your day is held in goodness. If you're staying, you're welcome to put a question in the chat. If you could write question in bold first, I'll be sure to catch it. And maybe I'll start. Let me just see if anybody's written a question first. Zac, I feel so much more settled in my body, and I think that's where I want to begin. You talked about sar and this narrowness and constriction. You talked about fear and different people feel the quality of tsar in all kinds of different emotions, as you pointed to, and different experiences. And I find for myself so often the tsar begins in my mind. I'm fearfully anticipating, I'm imagining the worst, I'm projecting, and then everything else tightens. And so wisely, you had us not begin by changing our thinking, but by connecting to the body, and inviting different ways of engaging with the body. And then you offered dropping in a word or a phrase. So, sort of adding a layer of maybe elements of the cognitive, of the intellectual. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experiences of the relationship between, I know this is a big question, the relationship between body and mind and heart, but in relationship to this practice specifically, what have you been learning about what the body is able to do, how we're able to discover through the body, that leads to the ripples of other kinds of change within and without?
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. I appreciate the question. You know, it's sometimes said that the whole of meditation practice is about noticing tightness and releasing. One way of looking at the whole thing. And to me, it's an endlessly interesting and onward leading thread to explore. When does tightness show up? And how might I soften it? And the body is incredibly helpful here because it's a barometer. It's not been my kind of default mode of experiencing things or relating to things. And I don't think I'm alone in that. But in my mind, it can be harder to tell, you know, oh, what's fruitful, what's nourishing? Oh, maybe this, maybe that. Sometimes this, sometimes that, and I can go round and round and round. But when I bring the lens of, what's just supporting my body to unbind? There's a kind of simplicity in that. I don't have to work it all out. I don't have to reconcile all the different ideas and questions, at least not right away. I care about that too, but it's for me a very helpfully simplifying place to begin. Is there tightness around? How might it be to soften somewhat? So yeah, that's one of the ways that I find the body really helpful, simplifying.
Beautiful. I also hear in what you're saying how much the body is in the present. That when I run ahead of myself, especially around anticipatory fear, it hasn't happened yet. And but I'm terrified of it in advance, in anticipation. And I hear you calling us to drop into what is actually here right now, in sensation, in the availability of softening. What a beautiful offering. Along those lines, there's a question from Lori, who says, just as the scar from my back surgery tightens, I'm working to loosen the muscles that tighten in an effort to protect the damaged part of my body. How do we discern and honor healthy protective tightening versus damaging tightening that slows or prevents healing?
Yeah, thanks so much, Laurie. It's really important to honor the movement of tightness, that there's so much good intention woven into it. And, you know, at times it's exactly what we need. So just as the Hasidic teachers are really happy to say one thing at one point and another thing at another point, and that's like this lens of noticing tightness and releasing is one lens. It's one way of looking. And if we try and stretch it over everything, then it gets itself too tight, right? We need lots of different ways of looking. How do we discern between a tightness that is protective and a tightness that is not a tightness that we want to open? Oh, yeah, I'm really with you in that question. You know, and I think what I mean by that is, at first I think, gosh, I don't really know. And I notice the movement of tightness, right? That wants to know, like, when should I do this? How would it work? And I think if I want to be really honest with you, like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I feel right now there's a kind of a release in that not knowing. That when I allow myself not to know exactly how I'm going to use this or when I'm going to use this, oh, something releases, something opens. So I guess I would want to say yes to both of the types of tightness that you've named. The tightness that we need at times, the protectiveness, and the tightness that we can release. Separation, distance, and letting it all come in. And to suggest that maybe discerning between the two is a kind of ongoing inquiry. I can't really know what I'm going to need in the future, but right here in this moment, if I listen, if I attune, I can tell. Just like right now, my feeling is if I try and work it out for the future, I feel the constriction. If I allow myself not to know, I feel the opening.
I so appreciate your phrasing and framing of the "I don't know," and that is the place where the inquiry begins, or where the invitation is. And you so beautifully, extend to us that nobody can actually tell you what the right answer is for anybody else at a particular moment. That actually, here is the guidance, here are the offerings, and then we each take it into our inquiry, into our experience, and explore and experiment. What is right in this moment? What might be right in the next moment? And I hear a great deal of trust in what you're putting forward. I'm grateful for that. I want to take another question. I don't know if you have more to say about the element of trust. Maybe before I do.
I'll say one thing. Thanks, Miriam. I feel a trust too in the release, but I tend not to feel it straight away. And that's why I find this framework of Mitzrayim, Egypt, and then Midbar, wilderness, and then Eretz Yisrael to be so helpful. Because often, like, my initial experience of even just sitting down to meditate or trying out softening and releasing, sometimes it's like, oh, so lovely. But sometimes it's like, oh, what's going to come in? I'm scared. I don't know. This feels a bit weird. This doesn't feel right. But when I allow myself to stay there, not to collapse, not to rush to the answer, not to run back to Egypt, just to hang out there, hang out in the not knowing, hang out in the midst of things, then, oh, suddenly I'm at home. Like, oh. So yeah, I really feel the trust, but it often takes me some time to get there.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the both and, as opposed to the duality or the dualism of either I'm in constriction or I'm in expansiveness. And being able to dwell in not trying to push away what is uncomfortable or difficult, but to notice as well, to invite in what else is available. And I want to connect it to a question that Laura asks. If the thing is to not be afraid, as you quoted Rebbe Nachman, do you have any suggestions as to how one may bring this into practice when the tightness, the racing heart, the constriction, the fear arrives in the middle of the night or upon wakening, and it seems magnified and harder to drop into practice at these times? When it seems to overtake, perhaps.
Amen. This is real, isn't it? Right? Fear is real, and I feel it. It comes. When I'm practicing and fear arises, love, softness. Yes, yes. I hear you. I feel you. You're welcome to be here without taking over, but take all the space you need. Really, come on in, sweetheart. Come on in. I know you're here, and that's okay. Sometimes I need to stop. You know, I'm doing something and stop. So valuable. Do something else. Turn attention to something that's pleasant. The eyes will often just naturally land somewhere that's just mildly pleasant. Bring to mind someone or some place or some memory actively, deliberately. There's some effort here. Let it be here. Let it emanate its pleasantness. And then another option is, or two more, as well as pleasantness, we can turn also to stability, anything that stabilizes, right? Feet on the floor, bottom on the chair. If you're lying in bed in the middle of the night, just really letting the body be heavy on the bed, feeling that contact, the earth coming up to meet you. And then at times, as well as welcoming and softening, letting it be here, as well as turning to pleasantness or stopping or finding stability, at times we can also bring these practices of softening and releasing to the fear itself. It's slightly different than just letting it be here and welcoming it in. We're actually bringing whatever supports us to unbind to the experience of fear, right? Perhaps noticing how it sort of comes and goes. It's here and then it's not here. And we can kind of bring anything that helps us to release right into the heart of the fear itself. Oh yeah, there's a few possibilities.
Thank you so much, Zac. I feel like we could linger here for quite a long time and continue to explore, but unfortunately, we have to pause here. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your guidance and practice. And thank you, everyone, for being here. We hope to see you again soon. Many blessings for your day. Bye-bye, everyone.